Peace, Love, Liberty Radio version 4.0. Prepare for launch.
OTC is go.
Pancapus is go.
PTC is go.
LPS is go.
Houston flight is go.
Molotov.
STM is go.
Safety is go.
STU is go.
LRD is go.
SRO is go.
CDI is go.
Launch Director, NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston.
Consequences so severe, so pull your trigger quickly, dear. Our patriots are acting up, let's punish them with fear. Hey, hey!
Hey, welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, and you know what? We are getting ever so close to that episode 350. And I'm serious, I do want your feedback on whether or not you think I should change up the intro just a little bit. I've been changing it every so often. I think about every 50 or 100 episodes, there have been minor tweaks and changes to the show. So give me your thoughts. Thoughts at fppradio.com. Thoughts at fppradio.com. Let me know what you think about the intros, whether you think I should change, keep them the same. If there's any kinds of changes you want to see to the show, I would love your feedback. Again, thoughts at fppradio.com. And maybe you have feedback that is in the form of, there's a question that you want me to answer. And I guess that's really not feedback, is it? No, it's not. But if you do have questions, every Wednesday I answer those. You can send those over to me via email, ama@fppradio.com. There's also a thread on Twitter and post on Facebook, both on the FPP Radio Facebook page and the Peace, Love, Liberty Radio Facebook page and the Free Press Publications Facebook page. All of those have threads for the Ask Me Anything. I decided to put that up earlier this time, where generally on Monday I put that up. But this time I decided, you know what, let me put this thing up on Saturday. That way give a few extra days and sort of see if it makes any kinds of difference as far as response. So now, with that out of the way, let me jump into version 4.0 of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Version 4.0, of course, is where I help you become a better version of you. I become a better version of me. And we explore topics that aren't necessarily things that you would have heard on this show, say, a year ago, where it's more self-help sorts of things, to where it's topics about self-improvement and things along that line. And today, I actually have an article, fairly old article, but new to me and probably new to you as well. But I've been talking a lot recently about purpose. And, it's just sort of one of those serendipitous things to where, I don't know what the word is. I'm sure the Germans have a word for it because the Germans have a word for everything. There's a German word. I don't know how to pronounce the actual German word, but it literally translates to grief bacon. And it is, I think, like the sort of the loose translation to what they're trying to say is it's weight that's put on from stress or grief. But it literally translates to grief bacon. And I'm fascinated by languages and the way they have words for various things. And the English language, like we have words, but sometimes you've got a word that means a lot of different things. But there should be a word, and there might be, and I just can't think of it right now. But it's one of those sort of recurring patterns to where, like just purpose has just constantly come up in various things without me even necessarily trying to make it a recurring theme, if that makes sense. So I will now make it an intentional theme of this show. And as I said, this is a fairly old article, but again, new to me. This was actually written in April of 1958 by a man who at that time was only 22 years old. You may have heard of him. A man by the name of Hunter S. Thompson. Yes, in 1958, 22-year-old Hunter S. Thompson wrote a letter on the meaning of life when he was asked by a friend for advice. The letter here and the preceding paragraphs come from tranquilmonkey.com. The author of this post says, what makes his response all the more profound is the fact that at the time, the world had no idea that he would become one of the most important writers of the 20th century. Therefore, his beliefs about purpose were hypothetical. They were statements of faith. But if it's true that our beliefs really do become reality, then there's no better example of a life fully realized than the one of Hunter S. Thompson. Let his perspective inspire you. This is dated April 22nd, 1958. Hunter S. Thompson was living in New York City at the time. He begins the letter. Dear Hume, you ask advice. What a very human and very dangerous thing to do. For to give advice to a man who asks what to do with his life implies something very close to egomania. To presume to point a man to the right and ultimate goal, to point with a trembling finger in the right direction, is something only a fool would take upon himself. I am not a fool, but I respect with sincerity in asking, or rather, I respect your sincerity in asking my advice. I ask you, though, in listening to what I say, to remember that all advice can only be a product of a man who gives it. What is truth to one may be disaster to another. I do not see life through your eyes, nor you through mine. If I were to attempt to give you specific advice, it would be too much like the blind leading the blind. There's more from the letter of Hunter S. Thompson about purpose and advice on life here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake Security Company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? Will anybody care? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I'll get back into the advice from Hunter S. Thompson on life and purpose here in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about a website that you need to know. You need to bookmark this website, especially if you advocate for free market money and use Bitcoin as an alternative in this fiat-centric world. That is Spend-A-Bit, the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin accepting merchant like I am, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. spendabit.fppradio.com. Hunter S. Thompson in 1958 was asked for advice on life. I am going through his response now. Let me back up just a hair. He says, "What is truth to one may be disaster to another. I do not see life through your eyes, nor you through mine. If I were to attempt to give you specific advice, it would be too much like the blind leading the blind." Shakespeare wrote, "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the sling and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles." And indeed, that is the question. Whether to float with the tide or to swim for a goal. It is a choice we must all make consciously or unconsciously at one time in our lives. So few people understand this. Think of any direction you've ever made which had a bearing on your future. I may be wrong, but I don't see how it could have been anything but a choice, however indirect, between two things I've mentioned, floating or swimming. Now, I'm going to pause here and ask you to think of a time where you've had to make a decision. And I'm not talking about you're at the restaurant and do I order the fish? Do I order the chicken? Do I order the fish? Do I order the chicken? No, think of a major time in your life where you've had to make a choice. Do I say yes to this job promotion? Do I say yes to this new job offer? Do I quit this job that I absolutely hate and risk everything for fill in the blank? Think about those. And then answer it the way Hunter S. Thompson gave you the options here. Were you floating along with the current, just going down the river, going out to sea, whatever it may be, just going along with the current, or were you swimming? Were you fighting towards a goal? Were you going against the stream? Were you going across the stream? Were you going the opposite direction of how everybody else thought you should go? He then continues, but why not float if you have no goal? That is another question. It is unquestionably better to enjoy the floating than to swim in uncertainty. So, how does a man find a goal? Not a castle in the stars, but a real and tangible thing. How can a man be sure he's not after the big rock candy mountain, the enticing sugar candy goal that has little taste and no substance? The answer, and in a sense the tragedy of life, is that we seek to understand the goal and not the man. We set up a goal which demands of us certain things, and we do those things. We adjust to the demands of a concept which cannot be valid. When you were young, let us say that you wanted to be a fireman. I feel reasonably safe in saying that you no longer want to be a fireman. Why? Because your perspective has changed. It's not the fireman who has changed, but you. Every man is the sum total of his reaction to experience. As your experiences differ and multiply, you become a different man, and hence your perspectives change. This goes on and on. Every reaction is a learning process. Every significant experience alters your perspective. So it would seem foolish, would it not, to adjust our lives to the demands of a goal we see from a different angle every day. How could we ever hope to accomplish anything other than galloping neurosis? The answer then must not deal with goals at all, nor with tangible goals anyway. Or rather, and not with tangible goals anyway. It would take reams of paper to develop this subject to fulfillment. God only knows how many books have been written on the meaning of man and that sort of thing, and God only knows how many people have pondered the subject. I use the term, and this is Hunter S. Thompson writing, he says, I use the term God only knows purely as an expression. There's very little sense in me, or rather, there's very little sense in my trying to give it up to you in the proverbial nutshell, because I'm the first to admit my absolute lack of qualification for reducing the meaning of life to 1 or 2 paragraphs. And again, I will pause here to again mention what I have previously about purpose, to where you might not know what your passion is. You might not even necessarily realize what your purpose is, but you do have one. You might be, as the previous example that I've given numerous times that I got from a podcast that I was listening to, where a motivational speaker was contacted after giving a speech about find your passion. And somebody said, I don't know what my passion is. I keep going to these motivational seminars and people say, find your passion, and I don't know what my passion is, and now I'm more depressed than ever. And so the motivational speaker then said, well, follow your curiosity. Be like the butterflies and the birds and the bees, and float from flower to flower, from tree to tree. They are following their curiosity. They have a grand purpose. Their purpose is to pollinate the flowers and the trees. They have a purpose, but not a passion. You have a purpose, even if you don't know what it is, even if you're just following your curiosity. You have a purpose. There's more. Stay tuned.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davy Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, we aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience. Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com, all major bookstores, and now available as an audiobook. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
I continue now with the letter written by Hunter S. Thompson on April 22nd, 1958, when he was living at 57 Perry Street, New York City. He was asked for advice from a friend. He begins, you ask advice. Oh, what a very human and very dangerous thing. I pick up now about halfway through, I believe. He says, I'm going to steer clear of the word existentialism, but you might keep it in mind as a key of sorts. You might also try something called Being and Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre, and another little thing called Existentialism from Dostoevsky to Sartre. These are merely suggestions. If you're genuinely satisfied with what you are and what you're doing, then give these books a wide berth. Let sleeping dogs lie. But back to the answer. As I said, to put our faith in tangible goals would seem to be, at best, unwise. So we do not strive to be a fireman, we do not strive to be a banker, nor a policeman, nor a doctor. We strive to be ourselves. But don't misunderstand me. I don't mean that we can't be firemen, bankers, or doctors, but that we must make the goal conform to the individual rather than the individual conform to the goal. In every man, Heredity and environment have combined to produce a creature of certain abilities and desires, including a deeply ingrained need to function in such a way that life will be meaningful. A man has to be something. He has to matter. I again pause to say that everyone wants to matter. Everyone wants to be meaningful, right? Why else would you continue on this thing called life if not to have some meaning or some purpose or to leave a legacy of some sort? For I honestly believe that a life that has no purpose, where there isn't some sort of deep ingrained, this is what I want future generations to remember me for, that a life without that, whatever you want to call that, is really a life not worth living. As long as you honestly believe that you can continue to affect others around you in a positive way, then you should continue living. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to end their life. Not in the least. And I don't want anybody to think that that's what I'm saying at all, because that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that as long as you want to, in some way, have an effect, an impact, a positive impact, and have that meaning in your life, then you have a will to live. And as long as you have that will to live, do everything you can to have that life of meaning, to be something, to matter. Getting back now to the letter written by Hunter S. Thompson when he was but 22 years old. He says, "As I see it then, the formula runs something like this. A man must choose a path which will let his abilities function at maximum efficiency towards the gratification of his desires. In doing this, he is fulfilling a need, giving himself identity by functioning in a set pattern towards a set goal. He avoids frustrating his potential, choosing a path which puts no limit on his self-development, and he avoids the terror of seeing his goal wilt or lose its charm as he draws closer to it, rather than bending himself to meet the demands of that which he seeks, and has bent his goal to conform to his own abilities and desire. In short, he has not dedicated his life to reaching a predefined goal, but he has rather chosen a way of life he knows he will enjoy. The goal is absolutely secondary. It is the functioning towards the goal which is important. And it seems almost ridiculous to say that a man must function in a pattern of his own choosing. For to let another man define your goals is to give up one of the most meaningful aspects of life, the definitive act of will which makes a man an individual. Let's assume that you think you have a choice of 8 paths to follow, all predefined, of course. And let's assume that you can't see any real purpose in any of the 8. Then, here's the essence of all I've said. You must find a 9th path. And I absolutely, this is me breaking in, I absolutely love this analogy. To where he says, all right, you're at an intersection, and 8 roads diverge in front of you. I know you know the poem by Robert Frost, I stood on a path, 2 roads, blah, 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 I took the one less traveled. Well, here the example given by Hunter S. Thompson is you've got 8 roads in front of you. You can go down any of the 8. You don't know what is necessarily down there, but you know that you don't necessarily like any of the choices that you have. Like, you can see for a bit, and you're like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that one. And you don't like any of the 8 choices in front of you. You must find the 9th path. You must find the path that you want to go down, even if you have to make the path yourself. And naturally, this is not as easy as it sounds. I'll continue and hopefully finish this letter here in the closing moments of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
This is Jeremy Scott, host of Dark 30. You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Hunter S. Thompson was asked in 1958 to give some advice on life. He says it's a very human and very dangerous thing to do, to ask for advice and to give it. Here in the closing moments, I will hopefully finish the letter. He says, let's assume you think you have a choice of 8 paths to follow, all predefined, and let's assume that you can't see any real purpose in any of the 8. Then, and here's the essence of all I've said, you must find a 9th path. Naturally, it isn't as easy as it sounds. You've lived a relatively narrow life, a vertical rather than horizontal existence. So it isn't any too difficult to understand why you seem to feel the way you do. But a man who procrastinates in his choosing will inevitably have his choice made for him by circumstance. In other words, not making a decision ultimately will be a decision. He says, so if you now number yourself among the disenchanted, then you have no choice but to accept things as they are or to seriously seek something else. But beware of looking for goals. Look for a way of life. Decide how you want to live and then see what you can do to make a living within the way of life. But you say, I don't know where to look. I don't know what to look for. And there's the crux. Is it worth giving up what I have to look for something better? I don't know. Is it? Who can make the decision but you? But even by deciding to look, you go a long way towards making a choice. If I don't call this to a halt, I'm going to find myself writing a book. I hope it's not as confusing as it looks at first glance. Keep in mind, of course, that this is my way of looking at things. I happen to think that it's pretty generally applicable, but you may not. Each of us has to create our own credo. This merely happens to be mine. If in any part of this does not seem to make any sense, by all means, call it to my attention. I'm not trying to send you out on the road in search of Valhalla, but merely pointing out that it is not necessary to accept the choices handed down to you by life as you know it. There is more to it than that. No one has to do something he doesn't want to do for the rest of his life. But then again, if that's what you wind up doing, by all means, convince yourself that you had to do it, and you'll have lots of company. And that's it for now. Until I hear from you again, I remain. And I remain willing to answer your questions every Wednesday. Send those over ama@fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copyheart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas, which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.